Senator Josh Hawley wants to double the federal minimum wage to 15 per hour, with legislation filed Tuesday to increase the rate last bumped up nearly 2 decades ago. For decades, working Americans have seen their wages flatline, Hawley said in a statement to The Hill. One major culprit of this is the failure of the federal minimum wage to keep up with the economic reality facing hardworking Americans every day. The increase would take effect next year when Hawley's home state hikes its rate to the same level. Most states like Missouri have set minimum wage levels above the 7.25 federal rate, and nearly a dozen of them will have minimum wage at or above 15 per hour after increases take effect this year. 5 states, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee, have never set their own rates, and 3, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Wyoming, have state minimum wages below 7.25 per hour. Those 8 states all default to the federal rate. The Hawley legislation, co-sponsored by Senator Peter Welch, also would set automatic increases to match inflation over time to prevent future standstills like the nation has faced since the last federal hike in 2009. Minimum wage hikes have historically faced pushback from some business advocacy groups. This proposal would more than double the minimum wage and slash over 800,000 jobs, Rebecca Paxton, research director at the Employment Policy Institute, said in a statement on Hawley's latest push. An overwhelming majority of economists agree that drastic minimum wage hikes cut employment, limit opportunities for workers, and shutter businesses. Hawley's proposal would take similar failed policies like California's and export them nationwide, she added. It's unclear whether the GOP-controlled Senate and House will take up the bipartisan legislation of what the timeline would look like as lawmakers try to hash out President Trump's priority legislation. So I don't think this is going to actually pass. It's just spoiler warning. Let me read this. Trump acknowledged that the current minimum wage is very low, but said he didn't want to raise it to a level that would ultimately force businesses to shutter. There is a level at which you could do it, absolutely. Trump told host Kirsten Walker, I would consider it. He added that the debate is very complicated because the cost of living varies among states. It would be nice to have just a minimum wage for the whole country, but it wouldn't work because you have places where it's inexpensive to live. I guess we have different definitions of inexpensive. So, again, this is not going to pass. At least in my opinion, I don't think so, because the Republicans are controlling the Senate and they seem pretty determined to just not go from, to never raise it. That's why it's been the same way for over 15 years. But the reason this story is significant is because if you told me even 3 years ago that a Republican senator would not only say they support, but also introduce legislation to raise the minimum wage at all, I would have said you were crazy. But this is the case with Hawley. And just to go back to what was said by this very goofy I mean, man, people, they don't even try anymore when they write this, when they say it. I guess there's a statement she put out. Where is it? I was laughing so hard I forgot what part of the article it was in. Damn, did the Hill delete it? Oh, here it is. Rebecca Paxton, the research director at the Employment Policies Institute. So she said that raising the wage would slash over 800,000 jobs. Now, I said before that the job I had a wage of 16, they raised to 20. Their way of not paying us this higher wage was to first cut up our hours, give us half shifts, and then just start using us twice or once a week. Just keep cutting the hours to the point where it didn't even make any sense to stay there. But it's like, ask yourself, is that the fault of the wage increase or the company being greedy and not trying to pay its employees? Because we've talked before about how a lot of these places like the whole revolving door of different employees. And I said, what good is having a job if you can't take care of yourself? If I'm working 40 hours a week and I'm making 500, I guess taxes take out whatever, but somewhere around $400, $500, but then my rent is $1,600, $1,007. It's like, yeah, the rent is cheaper than it is in some other places, but what I'm making is still not enough to cover that along with the other things I have going on. But also, how much you willing to bet that good old Rebecca, the research director at the Employment Policies Institute, how much you willing to bet that she's making more than $7.25 an hour? How much? It's always the people who are not getting paid that little itty bitty teeny tiny amount of money that seem to have the most opposition to raising it at all. Because remember, we've talked about how you can't even get them to agree to increases of a few dollars. It's 725. If with some of these Republicans, if you put up a bill that said we're going to make it $10 nationwide, 11, 12, again, a single digit increase, which is ironically enough what the 15 wage increase is, but whatever. If you raised it by just a few digits, they would still be in opposition to it because they don't believe there should be a minimum wage. They think that these businesses should get away with paying people basically crumbs for working for them all goddamn week. And if you aren't able to afford your rent or your groceries, oh, you just didn't work hard enough. You should have had 2 jobs. You should have had one job, 8 hours Monday through Friday, and another one 8 hours Saturday through Sunday, and then you can afford things. Yeah. And when they said the failed policies of California, I said, listen, California has a lot of problems. We have the housing crisis, the cost of groceries. But guys, this is the reality. Mississippi, Missouri, a lot of these, Tennessee, a lot of these other southern states have levels of poverty that are above the national rates. I know that Mississippi's was like 18 or 19% compared to the 12% that's national. So let's can this idea that the regular guy that goes to work one of these jobs is just flourishing when he goes and moves to the South. The problem is that so many people bought into the South as this place where you can get cheap rent and get a job that it makes it to where you can actually afford to live somewhere. And now what are they doing over there? They're raising the cost of rent. These businesses are like really flirting with they love the idea of paying people basically damn near nothing to work for them all week. And so when they see these increases, even if it's a marginal one by $1, $2, $3, $4, they start panicking because the number one thing of these massive corporations, not the mom and pop shops, that's a little bit different, but the number one thing of most of these corporations is to get a profit. And what they don't think they can get in profit, they try to get out of screwing their employees out of money. That's why you see all these layoffs. It's sad that there are people who are so opposed to workers that not only will they be against a minimum wage increase of a few dollars, 7 to 15 is not, it's not even a full $10, but they will also say, if you can't, survive off that 7 an hour, well, just get another job, just, work harder. Like I gave the example of how with my job, when I started working there, I was a part-time employee, and when it was 16 an hour, I had no problem getting 30 hours a week. And then when they raised it to $20 for, I guess they call them workers in the food service industry, whatever you call the term they use, fast food, whatever. At that point, they started to, instead of giving me the usual 8-hour shift that sometimes went even longer, you would get anywhere from 4 to 5.5 hours. And you would also just eventually, after, because I said for this whole past third of a year, or excuse me, for half of this year before I quit the place, you could only get 1 shift a week, one or 2 shifts a week. You went from, so before they raised it by just $4, you went from getting 30 hours a week, 20 something, whatever, no problem, to less than 5. And you tell me that that's the result of me being a lazy employee. Oh, just get another job. I tried to. I'm actively looking for one. But let's can this idea that company is going to shutter and be out of, because like I said, with most of these corporations, they can afford to pay people a few more dollars. They just don't want to, and they're trying to retain whatever profit they think they had before. So right now they're in the free fall of continuing to try and stave off the inevitable. Because eventually, as we've talked before, most of these different fast food places are pricing themselves out of the market. And if they go out, if their businesses shutter, it's not because they have to pay, me or however many other people $4 more an hour. It's because their stuff that they're selling costs too damn much. People are sick of getting paid little tiny itty bitty crumbs for working somewhere, and they're becoming more selective about what stuff they're willing to buy. You think if I'm sitting here getting 1 shift a week, I'm going to go and pay $13 for a goddamn burger? Are you out of your mind? So, but that's why I said it's just, it's unfortunate that people are so anti-worker, to where like they wouldn't even give you an example of what wage increase they think there shouldn't be any increase. Just get paid $7.25 while the cost of things continues to balloon and skyrocket forever.